Hi, I'm Michael Matthews, the Improv GM, and today I want to talk a little bit about how to make your characters more interesting during play, as opposed to trying to do all sorts of things outside of it. There's lots of advice out there on ways of helping create characters. Some of this I've talked about before, but the problem with a lot of it is either it goes into the kind of things that is okay if you're writing a book and can go back and change things, but is mostly taken from what actors use when they already have the full script and are looking for other things to kind of help flesh out the character. So improvisationally, one of the things I do when I'm working with particularly inexperienced or young actors is try to break the character down in a couple different ways. And one of the more common ones I've seen for role-playing games is like, oh, what are your character's quirks? And frankly, those are terrible ways to approach a character. It's fine to have quirks for your character. Everyone's kind of got their things. But if you are focused primarily on quirks, what happens is your character stops being a person and becomes this random collection of weirdness and oddities. It's very possible to create someone who's a caricature of a human being. And what we're looking for is creating interesting, active, and proactive people that you're going to be playing. So these types of going by quirks and giving them certain disadvantages socially or whatever, while there are people like that, is generally not a place I go to when helping someone create a character that has to go for more than like a short form improv scene, which I don't do a lot of. Most of the stuff I do is long form. We're looking at characters that when they come back over and over and over again are going to be okay. So one of the ways we do this is by trying to narrow down from this gigantic menu of options it feels like it's out there where you can do absolutely anything and narrow it down to something much smaller, to a single decision that you then follow the consequences for. So what we're talking about today is actually using emotion for it, because I find it's very useful, because the moment you have it, you have to start asking why. So if you've got something coming up, decide possibly before it even happens, how your character is going to react to this. You can go, okay, the next big thing that happens, my character will be angry about, or will be absolutely thrilled at, or is going to feel that this is beneath them. By deciding ahead of time what you're going to do, what it makes you do is when you get into that situation, it makes you take a second to evaluate, does this make sense? Rather, not does it make sense. Make it make sense. We are full of contradictions. Actual people will look at two very similar situations in very different lights for a number of different reasons. What's the reason? What's the reason that you are giddily happy that you find out this old priest had died? Perhaps your character is very religious and you know that he is now ascended to the gods and he is no longer tied in with the pain of the earth and he is truly in a better place. Perhaps this guy was a terrible human being and owed you a lot of money, or owed your family had done terrible things to. And then in that case, you are happy because he's gotten punished for whatever he did in some sort of karmic way. Maybe your character feels happy about it and then feels kind of guilty. Like you get this spike of like, oh, thank God. Oh, that's a terrible way for a person to be, because that happens in life. In life, sometimes you're happy at the misfortune of others for a moment. You might feel bad, and that then might grow out of it. Or sometimes you're just happy at the misfortune of others, and that's fine, because screw those people. They're terrible human beings. But what it does is when you choose something ahead of time, you get to decide what that means. Now, what helps is, when doing this during a scene with a new actor, I will ask some questions and the scene goes on pause. And this is one of those things that if a GM allows players to take those moments to figure out what it is, particularly early in a campaign, what ends up happening is you start getting a fuller idea of who this person is, and you're going to find after a short period of time, you stop having to slow it down to figure out what's going on. Speed is not a virtue when it comes to creating good characters. Taking moments to think it over, this character hasn't been in your head for the 25 years this character's been alive. They react completely out of hand because that's who they are. They've had all that time to grow into that person. You are just getting to know them and maybe finding you need to change some things. take your time to figure it out. Ask for it. And if you're a GM, give them this opportunity. We'll talk a little bit later about good ways to give opportunities like this. But so here's the thing. You choose an emotion, your character has that emotion, you ask yourself why. What is the reason that I've reacted in this way? Do you have a secondary reaction to it? Is the guilt over feeling happy that the person had died? Apathy is a bad choice almost always. Apathy is a way of essentially not making a choice and then throwing it onto something else where your character then just doesn't matter as far as what's happening goes. The only time I've seen apathy work is when a character honestly should be much more one way or the other about what has happened, but they are aggressively apathetic, which sounds weird, but I saw it during an improv scene at a workshop where this woman asked him to marry her, and he's like, oh, fine. And he was apathetic about the idea of getting married. He's like, he'll do it. And it worked because it was such an extreme away from what we expected. Now, that's not always a bad thing. Having the far extreme can actually work really good, as can having an appropriate reaction. But stay away from apathy. Apathy is a difficult place to be. Conflicted works. If your character's between two different emotions, that can work and give you a better thing than apathy. So, when you have some time to think about this, what does it tell you about how your characters come up? What things might have happened in the past? What's the reason that your character feels this particular way about what's happening? If someone comes and I found out that this old priest has died, and I'm happy, and I decide I wanted to be happy for a good reason, because it's easy to put like, oh, he did all these awful things. What if my character's genuinely happy because he knew this priest had been in pain, had been suffering, and now he is in a better place? Ask the GM. If that doesn't make sense, you can kind of change it. But what if my character is a religious zealot who feels like you have now left this world and gone someplace better, so we should all be so lucky? Which is weird coming from the way we have a tendency to look at death in Western culture. But it's a place to go. If I get very angry that I find out that someone is building an orphanage, perhaps there was something in that place that meant something to me. Perhaps there are people involved with it who I don't trust. Perhaps I came from an orphanage and think that they are terrible things to put children into. And you can ask your GM about these things. Like, take that moment to try to work through some of this stuff, figure it out, and that will start to like lock things into who this person is in the moment. This is why you really should not fall in love with a character background that has been unstated. When you go and you write like 30 pages worth of probably prose about what's happened to your character before you have stepped foot in them, I find it has a tendency to limit people. If you take that moment, ask those questions, figure it out, then keep going forward, you can see your character grow and change naturally, and what you're going to find is you become a lot faster at it. Relatively quickly, I get high school actors who are pausing and stuttering and not sure what to do and take forever. I give them one or two things by just asking them, how do you feel about this? Why? What happened that made this happen? And if they are stuck, I might give them a clue. It could be this. And then very quickly, once they've made a decision or two, the path starts to become a whole lot easier, because in laying the stuff behind you about why, you're actually creating a good amount of what's going to bring your character ahead. GMs, in order to help with this, what you should be doing is something that I think box text modules have gotten people away from, or maybe not let them get towards nearly as much as they should, and that is throwaway details. Throwaway details are fantastic. If you're able to just give a rough description of the place you're at and throw in things that don't matter, and if the characters know that, oh, this merchant we're going to talk to for a short time, he's going to have a personality, and it's not going to be something that matters. Throwaway details are things characters can grab onto to figure out how they feel about things and who their character is without affecting major plot developments. You may have these other characters are going to meet matter, so when they meet them for the first time, there's going to be a good reason why they might have some predispositions towards that person. But the person they meet on the street doesn't. And that person doesn't matter unless you decide later on they're interesting enough and the characters like them enough that we'll, or dislike them in the correct way, that we want to bring them back. I was playing with a group of improvisational actors who had never role-played before, but were interested in it, and we were playing the Buffy system. And they were calling to, I can't even remember why, but they're calling to Kinko's to like they make photocopies or have something printed out that they found, and just something like, yeah, we can do that. I'm like, hey, Tina, we still got the copy job going on 18. And the moment I said that, one of the just goes up because Tina's working, and then they start nudging each other. And then what they all decided immediately is they kind of all had a crush on Tina. And instead of like having them send the things or picking up, they all went there while she was working. And it became this kind of fun scene where you've got her not really interested, but them just being the kind of hangdogs that were hanging out. But it didn't matter. If that wasn't something that they clued into, if it wasn't something that they were going to enjoy, it would have taken a second. It would have been just a little momentary thing. I think with box text, we have a habit of creating these very long, specific bits of information that kind of let the players know everything in here is either to describe things or to give us specific clues. So if it's not describing like the shape of the room, is it giving it a specific clue as to, oh, maybe that there's some water trickling down towards here, so maybe it's a little bit sloped and there's a secret wall or something. And then they start trying to become Sherlock Holmes. If instead they're getting something that is your impressions of it without having to read it off of it, and then small throwaway details all the time, one, not only can it actually make things feel more real because you're not stopping to go to this thing, you're describing it almost as if you're seeing it. This is where bullet points are super handy if you want to have, here are the important things, but then throw in some details. The people that they meet when they go into a shop, the people, the guard. And one thing that can help with this is once in a while just ask a player, why does this guard you meet, why does he rub you the wrong way? Or what do you like about this person? And give them a little bit of time outside of any sort of plot relevant, we've got to get the ball rolling role-playing, to explore their characters some, to meet some other people, to make it feel like a world as opposed to like a BioWare game where there's a whole lot of people just sort of hanging out in empty hallways, but there's only a handful of people you can talk to that it actually matters. Work with them to create that. So if you take that moment just to create those emotions, choose what it is, then work your way through, I think you're going to find that your characters start to become a whole lot more real. And if the GMs give you this opportunity, particularly when it's not massively important what happens with this NPC, I think you're going to find that your overall role-playing improves, you like the characters better, and you actually can have a good deal of fun just being who this person is that you've created. So, if you like it, hit subscribe. It's the end of the summer has started, so I'm going to be trying to do more of these and get some backlogs up so I can start releasing them weekly again. Hit me up on Twitter, which I'll put a thing down in the Maboop for, and have yourself a great evening.